Hepimizin halalarının Facebook'ta ne kadar mahir olduğunu gördük mesela. Hiç bunları hayal edemiyorduk değil mi? Bir anda bir fotoğrafımızın, bir güzel bir Alaçatı akşam fotoğrafımızın altında teyzemiz bir anda gelip yavrum bir hırka giyseydin oralar esiyordur şeklinde varlıklı gösterebiliyor. Bunları hiç tahmin edemiyorduk. Yani bugün kuşaklar arasındaki farkın ötesinde bazen evlerin odaları arasında bile tarih farklılıkları oluyor değil mi? Yatak odasında bir tarih yaşanıyor, salonda bir başka tarih, çocuk odalarında başka bir tarih. Çok karmaşık bir çağda yaşıyoruz. Ama yine de bu sınıflandırmayı yapabilmek ve iletişimimizi üzerine kurgulayabilmek adına bazı kategorizasyonlara ihtiyacımız var. İşte bu konulardan bahsedecek bize kendi alanında son derece yetkin bir isim. Kendisi 20 yılı aşkın süredir marka, iletişim ve medya araştırmaları konusunda çalışmalarıyla biliniyor ve hem Avrupa'da hem Amerika'da birçok bu konuda farklı görevde yer aldı. Millward Brown'un medya ve dijitalden sorumlu marka direktörü kendisi. Yeni nesil için yeni bir pazarlama, Ad Reaction, X, Y, Z kuşağı başlıklı sunumuyla bizlerle birlikte olacak. Alkışlarınızla Sayın Duncan Southgate'i sahneye davet ediyorum.
Thanks very much. So, good morning. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see such a fantastically large and full room. I was last here in Istanbul for the Mobile Marketing Association's European Summit last October, and it's always a pleasure to be in Istanbul. I think I slightly prefer Istanbul in the spring sunshine. Sat out on the terrace yesterday, was actually absolutely gorgeous. It's also great, thank you for your session, Michael. It's also nice that we're all a bit warmed up. I thought I'd share my favourite stretching routine with you. So I used to be a runner, and I have terribly short calves. And I've got these perfect steps here. So if ever you have problems with your calves, try that one. Okay, so down to business. Millward Brown is well known around the world for being the world leaders in brand tracking, TV copy testing. Maybe slightly less known is how much work we do in the media and digital space, which is my responsibility there. We've done over 13,000 digital brand effectiveness studies, for example. I'm not going to talk about any of that today. What I'm going to talk about today is a study we ran called Ad Reaction. These kinds of studies have been running since 2001, but the most recent study focused exclusively on the idea of how much marketing needs to evolve for the new consumers that are coming on tap, the Gen Z cohort in particular. So, like all good stories, there's 3 chapters to this story. The first chapter is really just going to be the setup chapter about, well, is there a problem? Do we need to relearn and reinvent marketing? And if so, in what way? The second chapter is all going to be about media issues of which particular ad formats are more important in this new age. And then we'll finish up with a few creative learnings. Now, what I'm going to do today is share lots of Turkish data with you, but I'm going to give you just a taster, really. And then at the end, I'll point you to where you can go online. All of this data is free. So you don't need to write these numbers down quickly today. You can go online and get all of these numbers afterwards. I guess the point about generational understanding is that it's always been important. I mean, the father of advertising, Thomas Barrett, talked about this back in 1907, so over 100 years ago. He was talking about how, look, tastes change, fashions change, and if you as an advertiser don't move with those, then you start to look like you're out of touch with the people you're trying to talk to. And that doesn't always mean that what's new is better. It's just different, and as people's tastes evolve, you need to move with them. It's obvious, but the danger is that you kind of think, well, these things that these kids of these days are playing around with don't matter for my business. Well, they may not matter now, but they may very quickly matter in 2, 3, or 4 years' time, and if you're not learning about them now, then you could be in trouble. So before we go any further, let's just quickly define X, Y, and Z, or Z if you're Americanized. So who are Gen X? So Gen X are, in our study, we defined them as 35 to 49-year-olds. We did this research at the end of last year. And there's some debate about where X starts and stops, but most people agree it's in that sort of ballpark. Gen Y, we spoke to as, or often known as millennials, we defined as 20 to 34-year-olds. And we've defined Gen Z, or some people call them the centennials, as people under 20, so 19 and under. Now, of course, it's not their age that matters. This is the idea with generational learning, is that this is a cohort that, as over time, will move. They'll get older, obviously. But what makes them cohesive is the fact that they've grown up in different worlds. So they have and our colleagues at Kantar Futures talk about how it's their formative influences that really define them. So the Gen X guys grew up in the 80s, and when AIDS was a big issue, for example, and they were wowed by the introduction of cable TV and the arrival of the laptop and the PC. So Halit Ergenç, I probably can't say his name right, would be an example here in Turkey, and my hero Haile Gebrselassie would be another example from Ethiopia. Then the millennials obviously have come online, and then they've really taken advantage of all the web capabilities that the PC provided the base for. And their formative issues were things like 9/11 and the war on terror. But an email is just something they took for granted. That was a brand new thing for Gen X. So Zuck is obviously the kind of probably the global poster boy for the millennial generation. I'm going to say her name wrong as well, but here in Turkey we have Serenay Sarıkaya. So the Gen Zs are the focus of our presentation today, though. So let's spend a minute thinking about them. So they're under 20. They've grown up in a world that seems much more polarized than many generations before it. Compromise at the moment seems to be out of the window. It's either you're radically left or right. And I don't need to talk to you about that here in Turkey. I've been the wrong side of the Brexit vote in Britain. And obviously there's the Trump effect in America. But from a technological point of view, while there's all this polarization happening, there's obviously as we saw perfectly in the previous presentation, mobile has come of age. So the hyper-connected world is something that these guys take for granted. And from an advertising point of view, the top of the S-curve is where it gets interesting. Because once you have scale and you have capable devices, then you have a platform which lots of advertising formats can thrive in. So Gen Z are going to be our focus for today. The study is massive, and I'm not going to talk to you about all of it today. I'm just going to, as I say, give you a taster. There was a 39-country quantitative study, including the Turkish results, which I'll focus on today. In each country, we looked at Gens X, Y, and Z and compared the results. There's a whole lot of ad testing from 10 countries around the world and some qual forums in a few countries too. Again, all of this is up online, so it's not, there's nothing that you can't get hold of. So, chapter 1. What did we primarily learn? The first thing we learned is that Gen Z are a challenge. So that Houston, we do have a problem. We can't just carry on business as usual. It's not just that they're doing different things, it's that they're more actively trying to avoid ads. And I'll walk you through what I mean by that. The other thing is that I want you to try, if you can, for a few minutes, to just sort of throw away any assumptions you have about what kids are like today. Because we were actually really surprised by some of the results we saw when we asked attitudinal questions of Gen Z. So there's a lot of talk in the press about ad avoidance and ad blocking. So we asked our folk in these studies how they're trying to use technology to avoid ads. Whether they'd done something on their desktop to change the settings, or they'd installed a kind of an ad blocking app. Now this is claimed, so it might be slightly overclaimed, but there's a very, very clear generational difference. If it's the Gen Z and the millennials who are more likely to be using those technologies to try and avoid ads. They're also more likely to use sort of old school approaches to avoid ads. So we asked them whether you do something else, just look away from the screen, talk to someone, or just while the ad is running on your laptop or your mobile, do you just somehow try to not look at it? And again, that's higher among Gen Z and the millennials. So they're trying to avoid ads. When they see an ad in a skippable environment, they also act much faster. Of the ads we tested 12 ads in a YouTube environment, and we compared the behavioral responses of how quickly they skipped away from those ads. And you can see here, very clear, 3 seconds faster Gen Z was skipping than Gen X. So they're trying to avoid ads more, and they're skipping faster. And there's a lot of published evidence from academics in the neuroscience world claiming that Gen Z, because they've grown up with so much more choice, have become much faster at making decisions and much more selective about what they view. So I'm going to show you an ad that we tested in America now, which is a pretty good ad, and then we'll look at how it tested among Gen Z.
Where are you?
Well, the squirrels are back in the attic.
Mom?
Your dad won't call an exterminator.
Can I call you back, Mom?
He says it's personal this time.
If you're a mom, you call it the worst time. That's what you do. If you want to save 15% or more on car insurance, you switch to Geico. It's what you do.
Where are you? It's very loud there. Are you taking a Zumba class?
Okay, now I find that funny. I've had all kinds of embarrassing and untimely calls from my mum at work. However, the 16 to 19-year-olds we interviewed did not engage with that ad. They couldn't relate to it. They hadn't maybe been in that scenario. Although it was quite high energy, kind of, you would think they would like this kind of spy movie spoof. They might find it funny. Gen X and Y thought that was a great ad, but behaviorally, the Gen Z guys just didn't connect with it. Now we'll come back to look at some ads where things do a little better later on. This is then the other attitudinal question. We asked a whole bunch of attitudinal questions. What I was surprised at was how few differences we saw in the results. And this is Turkish data, but the same was true globally. We'd read some very interesting qualitative research from the US that said that this is a new generation that demands greater authenticity. This is a transparent world. So if you are no longer giving them honest and real content, Gen Z won't love your brand. Now, we saw globally, actually that wasn't true at all. There's no difference across the generations. And if anything, here in Turkey, it's the older people that prefer authenticity. So some of the assumptions and some of the US-based learning that gets a lot of global play, I think you need to question before you start totally reinventing your advertising strategy. We also expected them to be more, embrace newer diversity issues, like being more open to gay imagery within ads. And there were no differences there. There was a very slight difference to Gen Z, were a tiny bit more open to those kinds of things. Where the passion points really are in two very simple areas. They're much more passionate about music. They've grown up in a massive world of choice where they can get any song they like. And that's really fueled their passion for music. And they're obviously much more adept and interested in the social world through sharing off their selfies and engaging with friends that route. So that is much more fundamental to their worlds. And they are also spending time in different places. So the shift of media channels you would expect to have to make over time for the younger generation is fairly obvious. They are spending more time on mobile than elder generations. But again, they're a challenge because beyond mobile, they're spending pretty much less time everywhere else. So whether that's watching TV or reading print, they're spending a lot less time in those places. And a slightly less time exposed to outdoor ads as well. So this is, you would think, right, okay, fine, we'll just shift our budget to digital for the young guys, job done. And this is where chapter 2 kicks in. So now we need to understand, well, that's where they are, that's who they are, but what do they think of the ad options you've got at your disposal to hit them? And the problem is that everyone, including the young guys, prefer traditional ads. So all these cool new digital ads are actually very, very unpopular. Or the majority are very unpopular, shall I say. There are some exceptions to that, and we'll come on to those in this little chapter. So I'm a quant researcher, so apologies, lots of numbers. Let's just go down the left-hand column, which is our Gen Z numbers, and just look at the hierarchy of the ad formats. So we've been running these studies, as I said, since 2001, and this hierarchy hasn't really changed. You would have hoped that people didn't like digital ads back in 2001, but that might have got better over the years. And the sad story is it hasn't. So you still have, even our youngest guys, preferring outdoor ads, TV ads, print ads, over all of the digital stuff is in the bottom 5 rows. Online display, online video, but it's the mobile display and mobile video which score lowest of all. So the place they're spending the most time is the ad formats that they like the least. There are very few SKUs by generation, surprisingly, but the young guys are a little bit more open to cinema ads than other generations, and they're a bit more accepting of product placement in movies. So let's take this video ads down at the bottom there, and try and understand, well, why are they so negative towards video ads? I'm sure you know this yourself. You don't like being interrupted when you're doing something online or on your device. It's a much more active media and mindset. So when you're disrupted, you don't like that. And what that means is that the ad formats that take away the control that you think you have over your device are hated. So whereas the things that give you the option to click or give you a reward for viewing, like in a mobile app where you get a few power-up points for watching a 30-second video, those are cool. Everyone's happy with those. And the YouTube skippable pre-rolls, for example, everyone's happy with those. But what they're not happy with is anything non-skippable or that pops up and gets in the way. Obvious you would think, but this is why the Coalition for Better Ads and the IAB have such a big job on their hands, because all of these things at the bottom are what is shaping everyone's perception of the whole online ad industry. So we would recommend clearly moving to those more popular ad formats, which give your ad a better start point, and particularly for Gen Z, who are most demanding that the ads are skippable, for example. But that, of course, does create a creative problem, that you've got to have content that works in a skippable world. So the kinds of content that you need to be, or the way you need to be approaching these different generations, is to think about the kinds of stuff, the way they want to be spoken to. Our Gen X guys are pretty busy with family, loads of work commitments and so on. They just want stuff that makes fairly basic things that make life easier. But as you go back through the generations, the Gen Y stuff, they want things that are on trend a bit more, but they still want it to be high quality. Meanwhile, our Gen Z cohort are much more demanding of new, fun, exciting, interesting stuff. They've got a bit more downtime still. They're more open to fun things that are maybe a bit more frivolous. And so, yeah, I mean, we couldn't actually get these guys in to do the research, but they're obviously representing the people we spoke to here in Turkey. So again, back to quant numbers, there's very, very clear evidence that new stuff is a good idea for Gen Z. So sponsored lenses, sponsored filters on Snapchat, for example. Gen Z love those things, and they embrace them. And we do a lot of testing work with Snap, and we've seen some very, very strong effectiveness results for their campaigns. So that's not surprising that people are very, very positive about these formats. The other quick point I'll make, I don't want to, there's way too many numbers on this slide, but just focus on the top two rows. The other thing, because they're used to doing more stuff with their devices more quickly, the other thing that Gen Z demand is some way of interacting with campaigns. So giving people a choice of 2 routes through an ad or multiple options is probably a good idea, or engaging them in some kind of voting. They like that stuff. So that's the first 2 chapters done. We've got 7 minutes left, so we're on course. This is good. So what kind of ads work better among a younger generation? Well, I'm going to focus mainly on the Turkish findings here rather than the global story. It's a fairly simple story. It comes down to humor. And this is something we've already seen internationally and in Turkey, is the best way to stop people skipping ads is humor. That's magnified because it's even more important to the younger generations. So let's look at that data from Turkey. If an ad is funny or humorous, 61% of people say that will get them, that will make them more positive towards an ad. And it's not unimportant for other generations either, but it's especially important for that younger generation who just wants something interesting and fun. Less important in absolute terms, but relatively more important across the generations, are celebrity endorsements, whether that's kind of traditional celebrities or social media celebrities. It's not a must-have, but it's certainly something that you should be thinking more about if you're targeting a younger generation. So let's look at some examples that bring this together. This is an ad we tested in France. You may not speak French, but you won't need to understand the gist of this ad. The idea of this is it's for an online dating site called Meetic, and the campaign is all about loving your imperfections.
On n'a pas changé, Elodie. Toujours aussi bordélique. Pierre, les chaussettes au lit, c'est parfait pour rester célibataire à vie. Et Émilie, il pleut pas déjà assez sous la douche? Et entre nous, Thomas, c'est pas la chemise qui a rétréci. Vous êtes tous loin d'être parfaits. Mais c'est justement ça qui leur plaît.
Si vous n'aimez pas vos imperfections,
quelqu'un les aimera pour vous.
Mythic. Love your imperfections.
So love your own imperfections, find someone who loves them too, and life is good. I'm not sure my wife loves my little belly, but anyway. What was great when we tested this one was that we saw almost consistent results across the generations. So if anything, Gen Z preferred that to the other generations. It didn't turn off Gen X and Y, but it worked very well among Gen Z. Cool music, and something that all generations could relate to. It was the idea transcended. It wasn't just about dating for the young, dating for the quite young or the middle-aged. It was something that worked across the generations. And the top verbatim, top left, encompasses that. So it's cool and fun. So the Gen Z female top left was very happy with that. But I guess then just the only sort of slight caveat is going back to this idea of diversity that we mentioned earlier. This guy, bottom left, did like the ad. He was pretty positive about it as well. He could relate to the big belly. But he wasn't comfortable with the lesbian embrace, which, again, is going to be quite polarizing. And we did some other research on some other ads that were a bit polarizing. And what we found is there's very rarely is age a predictor of whether people will be more or less open to that. It comes down fundamentally to whether you are open-minded or less open-minded to whatever that issue that the brand is trying to tackle. So, okay, what's a great Turkish example of something that works in a skippable world and uses humor and celebrity very effectively in an online environment? Let's look at this ad for McDonald's now.
Emrah koş. Arabanı çiziyorlar.
Benim acım bana yeter.
Başka acılara gerek yok. McDonald's'tan yeni acılı tavuk klasik. Bu acı size yeter.
Now, what I like about that is it gets the job done pretty quickly. It's funny. I mean, I don't know how funny you would consider it, but I think it's certainly funny. Very well-known celebrity. What I also like is how it works well for the structure that's required for an online environment. We know that people will skip, so you need to brand early and engage early in that world, and this does that. The whole thing is set in this McDonald's restaurant. The burger is front and center of the whole imagery, and so it works particularly well. And that's a big shift for Millward Brown, because we've always been saying for the last 25, 30 years that it doesn't matter where your brand is in an ad. It could be in the last second of the ad, as long as the story is engaging and then you deliver your brand at the end. But in the online world, that has now flipped. So we are now very clearly saying, based on all of our copy testing evidence, that you need to get to brand early in a skippable world. So that's... I'm going to skip over this final ad because it repeats the point we've made from Meetic. So there's a whole bunch of implications here. In the media world, the landscape is changing. People are using different channels. Unfortunately, not ones where the ad formats are particularly well loved. So there's a new challenge. This new generation are going to avoid your ads unless you give them a reason to watch them, unless you front load them with your brand and with something interesting. And don't be afraid of your brand, because your brand can be the cue to make people watch. Most brands actually have a passionate audience out there that will be more likely to watch it if you're upfront about what you're promoting. please try and shift. Do your bit to work with the Coalition for Better Ads and the whole industry to steer clear of the invasive formats that are forcing people to use ad blockers. Please start, the younger your target audience is, the more you should be experimenting with stuff like sponsored lenses and so on. And giving them some interactive, something to play with. On the creative side, think about your target audience, and humor is not right for every brand, but is the biggest trigger you will find that will help you overcome skip resistance. Internationally, we also saw that music and design, so a very clean, clear, iPhone-friendly style design were also very important factors. That didn't come through in our Turkish data, but I think it's also worth considering. And finally, if you want to connect across generations, understand the attitudes that will drive things beyond individual age groups. So that's my story for today. If you want to find out more, this is the URL, millwardbrown.com/adreaction. And there's also a whole lot of stuff that we didn't have time for today about branded content. Because the other way to overcome the engagement challenge is to start using things that are not ads. So people are more receptive to branded content. Obviously, there's a reach challenge there, but there's a whole load of stuff about branded content in this online deliverable as well. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Duncan. Maybe we would have some questions from the audience. Var mı efendim sorusu olan? Şu an yok. Benim bir tane var. I have one question for you. I think it doesn't matter regardless the generation, but on average, it's the same, I think. Well, Generation Y and Z tends to block ads, skip them when available, and so on. They seem to ignore these creative works, and who's to blame for that?
I mean, I think it is an industry issue, right? So I think this coalition is a coalition of advertisers, publishers, and agencies, and needs to be, because advertisers, it's very tempting in the short term to think, well, if the ad format's there and it guarantees me a view, I'll use that one, versus something that is skippable, is optional, doesn't guarantee me a view. I think it's been tempting for the advertiser to use the invasive formats, tempting for the publishers to take that money, tempting for the agencies to deliver against that. So I think it is now, everyone's got to accept the consumer research that is clearly saying that's not sustainable.
Okay, thank you. Sanırım şuradan bir soru vardı. Mikrofonu uzatabilir miyiz? Elinizi, var mı? Tamam, okay.
Hi, my name is Endorsements. In your experience, what was the biggest or most significant differences between the Turkish test top population and the global ones? That's number one question. The other one is, I noticed that it seems like the generation X is closer to generation Z than generation Y. I would expect a more linear relation between the generations, but it looks like generation Y is more far away than generation X. Do you have any ideas about that?
Thank you for paying so much attention. That's a very good observation. It's very true, actually. In the global data, pretty much every metric was like that across the three. So if it was higher among Gen Z than Gen X, Gen Y was usually in the middle. And if it was the other way around, again, Gen Y was normally in the middle. In Turkey, we had much more of a U-shape on quite a few metrics, actually. So the Gen Y millennials were actually much more challenging and quite negative about a lot of things, more so than we expected. That was probably one of the big differences. The other one was that generally Gen Z were harder to reach here. So in other countries, they seem to have replaced their traditional TV print viewing with lots of digital activity, not just mobile, but also more laptop viewing as well. And here they were harder. Their overall scores on media consumption were lower. So I don't know whether that means that they're doing more things offline. I'm not sure. I don't have enough understanding of the landscape here. But yeah, again, all of that data is available online to look at, and you'll be able to see those differences.
Thank you. Başka sorusu olan var mı? Bu önde var. Elinizi tutarsanız arkadaşımız mikrofon getiriyor. Evet, buyurun.
Thank you. My name is Aycan from Xerox. Do you have any data about the generations evolution? For example, how they change their behavior in time. For example, if Gen X start to behave like Gen Y in time, do you have any data about it? Or they just stay as they are during the years and they don't evolve all their life?
Again, another really good question. So generational understanding is not just about a point in time, it is about how the cohorts evolve. This is a point in time study, so we haven't done that. Our colleagues at Kantar Futures do some work that tracks people over time, and some of the learning from those, they did a study on the Centennials, or Gen Z recently, which I would recommend you look up. So Kantar Futures, Centennials, I can give you the link if you need it. So that does, some of the trends that we're seeing in our point-in-time study are reflected in their learning. We've also written some papers about hypothesizing about, based on what we understand from this study, where we expect things to go next. Because some of the differences we expect to minimize over time, whereas others we think are genuinely, because they're linked to a formative influence. Anything that we think is linked to a formative influence, we expect to stay different over time, whereas things that are just more about life stage, we expect to diminish. So to give you just one example to that point, we found that Gen Z are much easier to target in the afternoons because they're not working, right? So they kick out of school at 2 o'clock, and in the afternoons, you can target Gen Z in the afternoons with digital media in a way that you can't target Gen X and Y. But that, in 5 years' time, that won't be the case. It will be the new 16 to 19-year-olds will. So there's things like life stage, which we haven't talked about today. We've tried to focus in this presentation on the things that we think will stay different into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I found something quite interesting. The youngsters tend to accept the ads in offline formats. Would that be because they don't see them a lot? You know, they use the electronic devices, mobile devices and PCs and so on, so they interact with ads a lot, so they tend to ignore them and prefer the offline because they don't even see them. May that be possible?
Could be. I mean, again, we're into the realms of hypothesis here. Yeah. What we did ask some qualitative questions about why the kind of why behind these numbers, and what we got was that young people are actually quite respectful of TV ads, and they think they're high quality. So they think that TV ads are higher quality than online ads. Maybe there's, again, the creative industry maybe has sort of, we're not spending enough attention on time on crafting good digital perhaps, but they thought that TV ads were higher quality, and therefore that's part of why they have more respect for it. They kind of know that people have spent a lot of money on them. So I think that it could be that they're seeing less of them, but it could also be that genuinely they think they are better.
Duncan, thank you so much. Hope to see you again another time.
Okay, thank you.
Duncan Southgate'i dinledik. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz kendisine. Teknoloji tarihi sanıyorum ister istemez hepimizin birazcık içinde yaşayarak da şahit olduğu alanlardan birisi. Geçenlerde notlarımı karıştırırken bir belgesel vesilesiyle mesela Compaq diye bir firma vardı. Hatırlayan var mı bilmiyorum ama bugün bilgisayar tarihinde popüler bilgisayar teknolojileri, ürünleri arasında yani iPhone'u vesaireyi de katarsak birçoğunun ilham babası, birçoğunun